Finding great Man-Bat stories isn't very easy, and it's not because Man-Bat stories in general are bad, it's because they're all basically the same. Man-Bat stories are very repetitive. This is what they're all like. Kirk Langstrom turns into the Man-Bat, and Batman has to help him return to his human form and reunite him with his family. I honestly really feel there wasn't any need for more than one Man-Bat story to ever be made. But we'll get to that when we get to my number 1. Before that, let's have a look at 4 other Man-Bat tales that are at least worth a look. Number 5. Leviathan, from Streets of Gotham issues 5 and 6, published in 2009. This two-parter was written by Chris Yost and penciled by Dustin Nguyen. So in this one, the hot-headed Huntress is cruising the city when she runs into a rampaging Man-Bat. Yep, Langstrom has once again become the Man-Bat, and is once again going berserk in downtown Gotham. Or is he? It eventually becomes apparent that the monster isn't just stalking random prey, he's actually looking for someone specific. But who and why? What are the Man-Bat's intentions, if he even has any? Well, without spoiling too much, I can say that he definitely has intentions. And the plot isn't at all what it initially seems. This comic is by no means amazing. It's simply a fun little read and a story that for once manages to do something different with Man-Bat, at least a little different. It's not another tale where Kirk has to fight his animal side and reunite with his family. In this one, he willingly becomes the Man-Bat, and for a very specific purpose, to actually do some good. It's a Man-Bat in control, not a rampaging beast. In the mid to late 1970s, we got a lot of these types of stories actually, and for a while back then, Man-Bat was even a sort of superhero and private detective. I've never really liked any of those stories. I don't feel they handled a heroic, in-control Man-Bat very well, and it all just ended up feeling goofy. This, much newer comic pulls it off a lot better. Number 4. Darkest Night of the Man-Bat, from Batman 536 to 538, published in 1996. This 3-parter was written by Doug Mensch and penciled by Kelly Jones. It starts off during the final night event, when the sun disappeared and the entire DC universe was drenched in eternal night for a while. Due to this nocturnal phenomena, the monster side of Kirk Langstrom is dragged out, and the good doctor finds himself transformed into the Man-Bat even without any serum. Initially he goes berserk in Gotham, catching the attention of Batman once again. It turns out that Kirk, still inside that beast, is struggling to control the Man-Bat, but he's finding it harder and harder each moment. Then, when the final night is finally over and the everlasting cycle of night has ended, Man-Bat, growing more savage by the minute, flees to the only other place with eternal darkness, the North Pole. Once there, he happens to run into a top-secret research facility experimenting with superweapons. Needless to say, chaos ensues, and as usual, it's up to Batman to take care of it all. Just like the previous entry, this one does the Man-Bat scenario a bit differently by sending him to the North Pole. It's a pretty neat concept and a cool visual to see Man-Bat in an icy landscape. It features a great portrayal of the character too, a man struggling to maintain control of himself and keep his savagery in check. It's not a perfect story though, it is a bit clunky, but overall pretty enjoyable and a good enough Man-Bat yarn. Of course, the fantastic artwork by Jones really helps a lot. He's great at drawing monsters, so Man-Bat was naturally a perfect fit for him. Number 3. Man-Bat Volume 2, a 3-issue miniseries also published in 1996. It was written by Chuck Dixon and penciled by Flint Henry. I actually did a video on this one over 2 years ago. Anybody remember that? Anyway, this is Man-Bat's second series. His original, intended as an ongoing series, ran for only 2 issues back in 1975 before it was cancelled. This one was only meant to be 3 issues. So in it, Kirk Langstrom is in worse shape than he's ever been. His bestial side has completely taken over and there's almost nothing left of the man inside the monster. He's been hiding in the wilderness for quite some time, but now, driven by some kind of primal urge, he comes back to Gotham. He, or rather it, doesn't really know why. There's something in that jungle of concrete for him, and he has to find it. It, of course, being his wife Francine and his daughter Rebecca. Meanwhile, brutal murders are being committed by some kind of flying creature, and the cops naturally suspect ManBat. But he isn't the culprit, and as it turns out, the true killer is after Francine next. Like I said in the video I did on this story, I really do not like the artwork. It's weird, confusing, and it makes everyone look like a monster, not just ManBat. Disregarding the art though, the story itself is great. Perhaps the most depressing and tragic ManBat story ever made. Kirk in this comic is truly pitiful and miserable. A sad, lost creature who has no clue what it is or where it belongs. You could easily have taken this premise in another direction. Kirk, having almost no humanity at all any longer, could have been a vicious beast instead, slaughtering people left and right. But fortunately, Chuck Dixon decided to play up ManBat's tragic side. A great tale, only hampered a bit by the bizarre art. Number 2. Wings, from Legends of the Dark Knight Annual number 5, published in 1995. This one was also written by Chuck Dixon, but thankfully not penciled by Flint Henry. It was penciled by Quique Alcatena, who does a far better job. So this is one of the 4 Bat-Villain Year 1 stories of 95. I recently talked about one of them, the Poison Ivy one. In other words, this is a ManBat origin story, a retelling of his classic origin. Not much is changed though, it's all basically the same. Kirk Langstrom, a scientist at a Gotham university, is seeking to cure deafness by mixing bats and human DNA. Here he himself is actually near deaf though, which he wasn't in the original story. Anyway, the dean of the university obviously don't approve of Kirk's mad experiment and thus cuts his funding. Desperate and short out of other options, Kirk decides to use himself as a test subject, and we all know the rest. This story could actually be a great template for a ManBat movie. While we witness Kirk's transformation, we also follow his fiancée, Francine's attempts at curing him. And there's also many parallels between ManBat and Batman. As Kirk becomes more bat-like, Batman is trying to be more bat-like himself in his war on crime. He's fighting a gang of crooks who's using rope lines to rob high places. And in a movie script, you easily could have substituted these crooks for a member of the Rogues Gallery and given him a much larger role, of course. Perhaps Batman and ManBat could have teamed up at the end to defeat this rogue. A very solid remake of the original classic ManBat story. And now for the greatest ManBat story of them all, and really the only necessary ManBat story. Number 1, the original ManBat Trilogy from Detective Comics 400, 402 and 407, all published in 1970. All 3 issues were written by Frank Robbins and penciled by Neal Adams. I've talked about this trilogy many times in the past. I've even made an entire video dedicated to it. This is, in my opinion, the be-all end-all when it comes to the character of ManBat. It's the character's 3 first appearances. Even though they weren't published right after each other, they do all come together and form one story. One complete story. It begins with Kirk Langstrom, well-meaning scientist using a bat gland serum on himself, and thus tragically transforming himself into a ManBat. He then grows worse and worse over time, and soon there's very little left of Kirk Langstrom and only a beast. Eventually he forces his fiancée Francine to take the serum too, so that the 2 of them can be together. And of course it then ends with Batman finding a cure for the both of them and restoring them to humanity. And that was that! The end of the ManBat saga. Or so it really should have been. I mean, what else do you need? It's a complete story right there, and everything that has come after has only paled in comparison anyway. Of course, I realized the problem that if this had been the only ManBat storyline, and nothing more had been made with the character, then he would have fallen into obscurity, been forgotten. We don't want that, but at the same time, further ManBat stories are simply redundant. That's why I've been so reluctant to even do this video for so long. Well, I did it now anyway, and I did it mainly for you guys, because I know many of you have wanted me to for ages. Now, if you're a casual Batman fan, I recommend you only read this ManBat story. You seriously don't need more. If, however, you've got a raging boner for ManBat, then I do recommend these 4 other tales as well. So there you have it, the 5 greatest ManBat comics, in my opinion. I've got plans to cover more of the Bat-Rogues that I've been neglecting over the years. For instance, I do believe the next video will be about Gotham City's resident serial killer, Victor Zsasz. So stay tuned for that, and as always, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.